Hello everyone, and welcome to a very interesting game between Anatoly Karpov and Boris Spassky. It was played in 1982, it was the FIDE World Cup, the finals, and these are the tiebreaks. The first game between Karpov and Spassky ended in a draw. This is game number 2, where Karpov has the white pieces, and as it is a tiebreak, it is a 15 minutes each game with no increments, so it can last only half an hour. Now, before we check out this very interesting game, we do have a nice photo challenge, so best of luck to everyone. Who is the gentleman in the photo here? There you have it, and you get extra points if you can name both of the cats. Okay, if you can name only one cat, that's, I guess, also a point, but it would be better if you could name both cats. So, that being said, let's check out this game and what had Spassky all worked up after the game. So Karpov opens with e4. We have d6, the Pirc Defense. d4, g6, knight to c3, and bishop to g7. Knight to f3, knight to d7 by Spassky, and now bishop to e2. Spassky goes e6, we have castles, and knight to e7 now. Bishop to g5 by Karpov, and here Spassky goes for h6. h6, a very interesting move because it questions Karpov's bishop and g5, forcing it back, but also Karpov plays bishop to e3, creates a nice target for Karpov later. For example, if Spassky castles kingside, then queen to d2 will create a very nice target on h6. So here Spassky plays another very interesting move. He goes b6. So already creating some targets on the king side. Now he says that he has plenty of time and he can take a moment to fianchetto the light square bishop as well. And here Karpov took a lot of time. It's a 15-minute game, so also in game number 1 he spent like 8 minutes on one move, and here also he spent some 4 minutes, I believe. I will put there is video footage of this entire event on YouTube, so I will put a link in the description below so you can watch the whole thing. Bishop to b7 prepared by Spassky, and now Karpov goes a4, preparing to push a5 and create weaknesses on the queen side. a5 by Spassky, he doesn't allow it. Queen to d2. Now, if Spassky would castle, then h6 would definitely be a problem. Bishop to b7, and now Karpov goes knight to e1. Knight to e1, he wants to push f3 to really solidify the e4 pawn, and then later in the future, knight to d3 to f4 will be an idea. Spassky goes f5, immediately piling up on that e4 pawn, and after some consideration, Karpov did play f3, although even here he took some minute and a half. Although the commentators were very confused why Karpov was spending so much time on this f3 move. Knight to f6, we have bishop to b5 check, asking Spassky what does he want to do here. Does he want to push c6, and then Karpov will simply push the bishop back, but then Spassky will no longer, if for example c6 is played here, you will have to move the bishop, and then it's not all that likely that you will castle queen side. So you push the pawns on the king side, you push the pawns on the queen side, your king will pretty much have to stay in the center, or maybe even king f7 will be an idea. But okay, bishop to b5 with check, bishop to c6, now Spassky offers an exchange of bishops, bishop captures, this comes with check, knight captures, and now d5. E captures on d5, knight captures on d5, and here we have knight to e7 by Spassky. Capturing on d5 was also an idea. For example, knight captures, e captures, and now knight to e5, but then c3 is coming, and white will have a very pleasant game here. So instead, after knight captures on d5, knight to e7 was an attempt, and here Karpov has plenty of good plans. He could play knight captures here, and after bishop captures, either capture on h6 immediately, but this will allow capturing the pawn on b2, or he could play something like c3, but then black could simply push queen d7, castles queenside, bring the other rook over to the king side, and then black would even offer the pawn here just to open up the h file. Another idea after this knight to e7 move by Spassky is knight captures on e7. And then after queen captures, e captures on f5, g captures on f5, and then bringing the knight over to d3, where knight will be able to come to to f4, rook can come to e1, knight here will be an idea. Although this would all be fine for white, Karpov has a different idea. So after knight e7, he simply plays c4, and you know, if Spassky wants to release the tension, then Karpov will simply increase his presence in the center of the board, and if either of the pawns capture on d5, then he will control c6 and e6, and Karpov would enjoy this very much. So king to f7 by Spassky. Also possible was something like knight captures here, but then, like we said, e captures on d5, knight goes here with preparation of knight e5, but then Karpov's knight can go something like knight c2, knight to d4, and then go all the way to c6 or e6. Probably after knight c2 to d4, Spassky will have to give up the dark square bishop, as you don't want to allow this knight to come to e6. So instead of all of this, king to f7 was played by Spassky. And now finally Karpov moves the knight from e1, knight to d3, preparing to go to f4. We have queen to d7, and here Karpov could play knight captures on e7. It's a very interesting line. King captures on e7, or queen captures and then pawn captures here, and rook e1 will be a very nice attack for white. King captures and then e5. And now, of course, if you capture, then you get knight captures here, queen captures, bishop captures, and now you have this Zwischenzug, or an in-between move, knight captures on g6. Sorry about that. First, knight captures on g6, and then after black reacts, you cannot go king f7 to attack the knight, because then knight captures rook with check. So here you would have to move the king, and only now does white capture back. Rook d8, you move the bishop, bishop f4, and white would enjoy his extra pawn. So Karpov did not go for this, rather he played knight captures on f6. He has his plan and he keeps to it. We have bishop captures, and here comes bishop captures on h6, simply grabbing a pawn. Here was a very nice moment where probably a player like Mikhail Tal would go for something like e5, which would create a very nice attack for white. For example, if you push e5, of course you don't want to allow d captures, because now knight captures here, checks the king, forks the queen. If you don't want to lose the queen, you have to capture the knight, but then you're losing the queen either way. So after this e5 move, you would have to play bishop here, and then rook f2 e1 is coming, and white will enjoy again a very nice attack. But Karpov doesn't want anything to do with this. Instead, he simply grabs dh pawn. Which seems kind of dangerous, because you know, you're opening the h-file here. Spassky already has a rook on h6, but Karpov says that this is completely fine. Knight to c6 by Spassky, rook a to e1, and here we have rook a to e8. We have bishop to g5, and here bishop to d4 check is played. You could play something like king to h1. There are no tricks here. For example, even if you play king to h1, moves like rook captures don't really work. You can simply capture, and if the other rook comes here, king to g3 will escape nicely, and there are no good ways for black to actually continue this attack, although it seems very scary. The bishop is guarding f2 and g1, the rook is controlling the entire h-file, but there is no good way to continue this attack. After we try to open some lines, then queen to f4 check is coming, and then white is on the attack. So after this bishop to d4 check, even though you could move the king, it's a rapid game. You don't want to allow moves like rook captures on h2 when the FIDE World Cup title is on the line. So bishop to e3, Karpov offers to trade bishops, and now queen to e6 by Spassky after giving the position some consideration. Bishop captures, knight captures, and now knight to f4. Finally, the knight comes into f4, inviting Spassky to capture on c4, but then it will be very hard to defend the knight on d4. But again, after some consideration, Spassky decides to capture it. He decides that this is all right. Karpov immediately goes rook to c1, the move that refutes Spassky's idea. We have queen captures on a4, and now comes, of course, rook captures on c7 with check. So this is the critical moment, but it doesn't really matter, because here Spassky played rook to e7, and this was the moment where the commentators were like, whoa, Spassky touched the rook, he now has to play with the rook. So he did, of course, have to play it. Rook to e7 was played, and this is, of course, the idea. He missed. Rook captures on e7, king captures, and knight captures on g6 with check. King has to move, and then Karpov simply grabs a free rook on h8. And okay, I don't think he was very upset about this, but even without, after this rook captures on c7, it doesn't matter that he blundered the rook. Whatever he plays here, it's a game over. So even if something like king to g8 is played, you can go king to g8, simply moving the king, then knight to d5 is coming, threatening to jump to f6, and there's very little you can do here. Rook to e6, queen g5 is coming, the queen is coming now with the threat of queen to d8, and this will be checkmate after a couple of moves. So after queen blocks, now comes knight here with check, and now you have to give up the queen, or it doesn't matter. Even if you give up the rook, you will still not enjoy this very much. Rook captures, now the queen has to move, for example, queen f8, and then you're getting checkmated. The king has nowhere to go, queen blocks, queen captures, checkmate. But yeah, this is the epic moment. Rook c7 check, Spassky blocked, rook e7, captures, and here knight g6 check was played. The move Spassky missed, and it was all over. And like I said, there is complete footage of this event, so I will put a link in the description below. It will be the first thing you will see in the description, so feel free to check it out. I think the video is some half an hour long, but for those of you who don't have half an hour, I did prepare for you. Here it is, the moment where Spassky lights the cigarette. So he just blundered. Karpov is leaving the table. Here's Spassky lighting the cigarette, shaking his head, very upset with himself. But yeah, I mean, you're playing Karpov as black.
I could never imagine
not much you can do here.
So
yeah,
immediately.
There you have it, Spassky in disbelief. But he did make it to the finals of the FIDE World Cup, and you know, he did draw the first game against Karpov, and then he lost the second one. But you know, Karpov was a beast in those days, as he was the reigning world champion, and he did have the white pieces. So yeah, but a very interesting game. I do hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, this is something to take a break from the Fischer series. But as of tomorrow, we are continuing our Fischer series with the first candidates match of 1971. So you know, I do hope you will enjoy that as well. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. As usual, you can check all my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with the before mentioned content. See you soon.